Emanuel Lasker starts his game with a shocking move f4. Yes, he's playing the bird's opening, but since this game was played in 1889, when the chess theory hadn't much evolved, bird's opening was considered a good chess opening. But if you play it today, well, it's not a good opening because you're just simply weakening your own king side diagonal and allowing your opponent to do a lot of counterplay. Anyway, coming back to the game, his opponent Johann Hermann Bauer played the classic d5, taking the center. He's going with the standards. Lasker played e3 to support the pawn on f4 and forming a strong pawn chain over here, pointing towards the king side of the board, clearly stating that Lasker is interested in attacking on king side of the board. Johann played knight to f6, simply developing his kingside piece, and now b3 by Lasker because there is no place for this bishop over here to develop on this diagonal. So b3 makes sense because now this bishop can be fianchettoed on this long diagonal, and that way Lasker would have taken control of this dark squares on the board. e6 by Johann. Johann is taking control of the light squares on the board and his pawn chain is pointing towards the queen side. So clearly Johann is planning to do some counter activity on the queen side of the board. Bishop to b2 by Lasker, the obvious, developing the bishop on the long diagonal, and now bishop e7 by Johann. Johann is simply developing his another king side piece and is ready to castle at any point of time in the game. Lasker continued with bishop to d3. Lasker's ideas are quite clear. He's clearly aiming towards the king side of the board. Look at this strong bishop laser beaming on the king side. And now here Johann plays b6. He's planning to fianchetto his bishop on the light square diagonal over here and probably push this pawn ahead in later part of the game. Knight to c3 by Lasker, simply developing, and now bishop to b7. Knight f3, simply developing, knight b to d7, and now both players castle over here. Looks like both the players have completed developing most of their pieces, but if you carefully look at this board, Lasker's development looks quite dangerous. Look at both these strong bishops over here. Look at this knight over here ready to jump on either side of the board. This rook is going to be active on the f file. This queen is ready to jump over here. All of Lasker's pieces have been carefully developed in such a way that in just a few moves they can go wild and launch a devastating attack against Black's king. And look at Black's pieces over here. This bishop is on this diagonal. This bishop is doing God knows what over here. This knight hasn't been developed to a good place yet. Black pieces still look passive and not very strongly placed when it comes to attacking White's pieces. Lasker continued with knight to e2. What's the idea? Well, obviously to open up the diagonal for this bishop. Also, this knight needs to be placed to a better place. So, where is this knight heading here from? Obviously not over here because in that case it will be blocking this bishop again. So, this knight is definitely heading for the g3 square where it can assist both of these bishops, this knight and the queen to launch a deadly attack against Black's king. Johann is still not taking Lasker's moves very seriously. He just continues with c5. He's like, let me just grab some space on the queen side of the board. And now Lasker plays knight to g3. Another piece has been actively placed on the king side of the board. Now there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces ready to jump on Black king. But is Johann even aware that something deadly is about to come? Well, clearly not, because he then plays queen to c7, simply developing, very passive move. And now Lasker plays knight to e5. What's the idea? Well, he wants to bring the queen on the king side of the board. So first he wants to get rid of this knight over here. Also, this knight is nicely placed in the center of the board, and in case his opponent exchanges, which he did in the game, then Lasker was thinking that he can capture back with the bishop, winning a tempo while attacking Black's queen. Queen moved to c6, forming a battery on this light square diagonal, and now Lasker played queen to e2. Forming a battery on other side of the board, and here, although there was no major threat, but Johann got a bit uncomfortable with this newly formed battery, and he really didn't like the idea of this bishop coming over here and hitting his queen. So he proactively played a6 in order to stop this bishop over here. But guess what? That's a blunder. Why? Because that allowed Lasker to launch a deadly attack on Black's king side, starting with knight to h5. Well, what is the idea? Well, let's go back and see. This bishop is ready to sacrifice itself on the h7 square at any point of time in the game. But this knight is beautifully protecting this pawn over here. So, if Lasker trades this knight first for his bishop, then Lasker will have to deal with this another bishop who will be guarding this key pawn on black's king side. Lasker didn't really like that idea. So, Lasker is like, I don't want to waste my bishops and get another defender over here. Let me just make use of my knight in order to get rid of this knight over here. So, that is why he played knight to h5, challenging the knight over here. Now, the knight is double attacked. His opponent came under tremendous pressure and made the mistake of capturing this knight, thinking that if the queen captures back, then this checkmate threat at the h7 square can easily be stopped either with f5, h6 or even g6, and black would be doing completely fine over here. But Johann completely missed that when a strong player attacks his opponent, he doesn't play slow moves. He looks for forcing moves and bold sacrifices that blast opens the position. So guess what Lasker played over here? Before I tell you his move, I'll give you 5 seconds to think to find out what he played next. So what Lasker played in the game was bishop takes pawn check, because if the king doesn't capture the bishop back, then the queen can capture the knight anyway, and now there is a threat of discovered check. Let's go back. So his opponent obviously captured the bishop, and now Lasker can capture the knight with a tempo gaining move. It's a check. Black has to move the king to g8, the only move left. And now how can white continue the attack on the black king? Can you find the next brilliant move played by Lasker in the game? I'll give you 5 seconds to think. Well, if you're thinking of rook to f3 in order to get the rook over here or maybe over here to double up pressure, then you're actually playing too slow, because when you play rook to f3, you're giving your opponent time to counter attack you. So in case if you play rook to f3, your opponent will play f6, attacking your bishop right away. And now there is no time for you to attack because you wasted a move in playing a slow move. So let's go back. Therefore, rook to f3 doesn't work over here. Since you have already sacrificed material, you have to play bold moves. Moves that blast opens the opponent's position and makes the king exposed and vulnerable. So what did Lasker play in the game? Well, he blast opened the position with another daring bold sacrifice. Bishop takes pawn. Why is he sacrificing another bishop? Well, it's obvious. Just to expose the black king. Simple. Now the king is wide open over here on these 2 files, and most of the strong army of the black is sitting on the queen side of the board. How is black gonna defend the open vulnerable king? Well, that was the whole idea, to sacrifice 2 bishops one after the other. The king is naked now. How is black gonna defend? Now Lasker continued his attack and played another strong move. But before I tell you, I want you to guess that move. I'll give you 5 seconds to think. So if you're thinking rook to f3 again in order to get the rook over here, then the problem with that move is after you play rook to f3, you are giving your opponent time to counter attack you, because now your opponent will play rook to h8, attacking your queen. Or he can also play rook to g8, and now if you attack, the opponent's king can easily escape on the f8 square and all your sacrifices has gone waste. So rook to f3 doesn't work over here. You have to play threatening, scary, bold moves. So what did Lasker play over here? He played queen to g4. Continue to attack the king. King moved to h7. The king has shifted to the side of the board, and now rook to f3. There is a checkmate threat over here. How can Johann stop this threat? Well, he had to play e5 so that the queen can come and stop the checkmate. Rook to h3 check anyway. Queen h6. There is no other option. He has to give up his beloved queen. Rook takes queen check. Oh, that was brutal. I'm sure Johann was crying at this point of time. He's just lost his queen for a rook. King takes rook. And now Lasker played another killer move. Can you find that move? Well, don't waste your time in checking the king, because there exists a deadly move on the board, and that is queen to d7, forking both the bishops. Black can save both the bishops. He's forced to give up one, and now he has to choose whether he wants to keep the light squared one or the dark squared one. Black chose to keep his dark squared bishop, and now the light squared bishop is gone, and now king to g7, rook to f1. Lasker is activating his last piece, which was inactive all this while. Rook a to b8, attacking the queen. Queen moves, another rook attacks. And now queen comebacks to the king side of the board, attacking the king again. King moves to f8 and now pawn takes pawn, attacking the bishop. If bishop takes the pawn, then Johann will simply lose the bishop because queen f5 threatens to checkmate on the f7 square as well as attacks the bishop. So taking the pawn definitely doesn't work. So bishop moved to g7 and now Lasker built up more pressure with his next move. What is that move? Try to find out. The obvious e6. The pawn is pinned to the king. If you have any piece or pawn pinned to the king, then you should simply just put more pressure on that pinned piece or pawn and thereby increase the stress levels of your opponent. Now, since the pawn is double attacked and is protected only once, Johann plays rook to b7 in order to add another defender to this pawn. Lasker adds another attacker, queen to g6. The pawn is pinned, so cannot capture the queen. And now there are 3 attackers on this pawn. How can Johann protect this pawn? Well, he had to push the pawn one step ahead, f6. That's the only way out. And it looks like that Johann has somehow managed to save his position. So, how can Lasker continue his attack? What should he play next? Try to find out the next move. Lasker went for another bold exchange sacrifice with rook takes pawn check, bishop takes rook, queen takes bishop check, king moves to e8 and now queen h8 check, king to e7 is forced and now queen g7 check, putting a skewer on black's pieces. King takes pawn, queen takes rook, rook to d6, simply protecting the pawn over here. Queen chops off the a pawn, d4, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, h4 by Lasker. Lasker has 2 connected, strong outside pass pawns. Johann tries to do some counter attack with the move d3, but guess what Lasker played in the game? Pawn takes pawn? No, that's too slow. He went with the bold capture, queen takes pawn. What's the idea? Well, if rook takes queen, pawn takes rook, then this king and pawn endgame is obviously winning for Lasker. He has 2 connected strong outside pass pawns. He has double pawns on the d file, which are again pass pawns. 2 pawns against 1 over here. There is no way Johann can win this game. It should be an easy peasy win for white. So let's go back. Therefore, after this deadly capture, the bold capture of Lasker, Johann lost all hopes in the game and therefore he resigned at this point of time. And because of Lasker's daring sacrifices of 2 of his bishops to blast open the black's position, this game went down in history and became famous as Lasker's double bishop sacrifice game. Like this video and subscribe to my channel if you loved watching this video. And now don't run because it's time for you to solve this puzzle like Emanuel Lasker. So here is an interesting position on the board. Material looks equal, but black can win a lot of material over here if black is able to find the crushing moves. So can you find the winning moves for black over here? Let me know your answers in the comments box and I'll see you in the next video.